Welcome back to the Delaware Way. We continue our conversation with State Treasurer Ken Simpler. When we left off, we were talking about the cycle of budget crises that the state seems to be in every year. It seems like there's tough decisions that need to be made because of the revenue that was brought in the past year. You would like to break that cycle. Well, you have some suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people, when I go around the state of Delaware, or frankly anywhere, Larry, I mean, when I say, do you want more chaos or do you want more certainty? You know, most people prefer certainty, and I do too. As a fiscal officer, I especially appreciate certainty. It's one thing to have rising costs, and as a state, we do have rising costs. Costs are driven by inflation, costs are driven by population growth, but if that cost is predictable, I can at least start to plan around it, right? I can make long-term decisions around health policy or long-term decisions around education policy. But when you're caught up every year just trying to find a couple quarters in the cushions, or last year, let's say, find 10% of the budget, right? It wasn't a trivial exercise. So you can't do long-term strategic thinking and effective planning when every year there's a crisis around, and a crisis goes both ways, because a crisis right now, the governor perceives this year to be a crisis, because with 7% budget growth, the governor is trying to say, whoa, we can't spend all of that. We can't build all that in the base budget because we're not going to get 7% the year after. We might be back at 0 or 1 or 3.
That's the problem. Yeah. What's the solution to that?
So it's fairly simplistic. We could choose to have a budget test that says we're going to allow the base budget to grow by a basket of economic indicators. That's going to tell us whether we're on a sustainable path that's within our means and our needs, meets our needs and is within our means, not whatever the revenue produces every year. And hence, we'll take that revenue when it's over that benchmark, let's call it the budget benchmark, and we'll save that revenue. We'll put it in an account. The state treasurer will put it in one of the many custodial accounts we have. And when the budget benchmark is below that long-term, or when the revenues are below that long-term budget benchmark, we'll draw from that fund. So we don't have to have these erratic decisions year to year around whether at the 11th hour we raise real estate transfer taxes or whether we cut nonprofit budgets. We'll have a sustainable way of thinking as a people how fast we can grow this enterprise we call state government.
Do you feel like you're listened to as a Republican in a Democratic legislature and a Democratic government?
I mean, I certainly feel that way because I don't try to lead discussions as the Republican state treasurer, right? I try to lead discussions as the state treasurer. I think that people on both sides of the aisle respect the fact that I'm doing this job because this is what I've done my whole life and because they believe that I have the financial chops to do it. So do they listen? Absolutely. But long-term, large-scale stuff is really challenging to do well. Systemic stuff is challenging to do well.
You know, it's funny. We've had so many legislators here, and we've talked about the budget crisis so many times, and it might sound conspiratorial, but it seems to me that there's an addiction to chaos, and that there sometimes can be a benefit to chaos for certain individuals.
In all the legislators that I have spoken to, and all the policymakers, even all the stakeholder groups, the nonprofit groups, the realtors, you name it, right? I have yet to have someone say, yeah, I win to chaos. What people do win to that have been here a long time is status quo, because it's a system they understand, it's a system they know, and whenever you try to do large-scale organizational change, you're always going to be up against inertia. You're going to be up against the people that at least understand the risks and the benefits of the current system and don't know how it's going to work in the future.
And certainly for potential businesses, they need certainty. They need to know what your state's going to look like years from now. And at this point, Delaware can't answer that question.
I think it's a huge competitive advantage. The world has been, I think I've grown up in a time period, I think you and I are probably approximate in age, I mean, since 9/11, since the Great Recession, you know, the world feels less certain.
And if you went way back. I don't remember the Great Recession.
Not the Great Depression, Larry.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I messed up. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming in. State Treasurer Ken Simpler. When we come back, everybody talks about homegrown talent forming companies. I know that's important to the state as well. We're going to introduce you to a young woman who has a wonderful idea that's going to help a segment of the population that needs help when the Delaware Way continues.